I will click Audacity now.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about things that we fucked up in 2022.
Well, we're off to a great start because our episode started behind the scenes with Christina's AirPods and laptop deciding to not be compatible today for like 20 minutes. So we just are screwing everything up today.
Which is hilarious because we wanted to get started early.
I know. But I think we'll still be able to finish within a good amount of time and everything. So but yeah, so I thought of this episode, I pitched it to Christina, and I honestly thought of it because our mentors recorded an episode of their biggest mistakes. And I really appreciated the episode because it's not that I want to see people fail. I obviously don't, but I felt closer to the people that I worked with because they were just admitting mistakes and that they were human. And theirs obviously was like a business, like we made these business mistakes and this with revenue and hiring and blah, 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 and all of that. And I thought, it would probably be cool to, give you guys who listen to the podcast. I know we have a super loyal listener following. Is that what we call it? Super loyal audience. And you guys are awesome. And you guys really connect and bond with us. So, it'd be cool to give you a little bit of the inside scoop of what the heck has happened in 2022, on the business side, but also on the fitness side, the personal side, and just the shit we fucked up.
Yeah, and so I think this is funny because I was talking to one of my clients who struggled a little bit around the holidays, between Christmas and New Year. She had family in town and she reached out to me. She's like, I was hesitant to send this check-in, and I responded back and I was like, hey, I didn't hit my macros perfectly. I didn't get all my training and cardio in. That didn't happen. And she was like, oh, well, that makes me feel a little bit better. And I was like, yeah, I'm not perfect. And I was like, but I felt the exact same way checking in with my coach. And I was scared. And he told me, hey, I wasn't 100% perfect with my nutrition training either. And I was like, oh, this is coming from the super hardcore dude. So yeah, that does make me feel a little bit better.
Yeah. It also kind of puts into light what our clients even think of us, right? They probably think of us in a similar way, we're super hardcore and or they really look up to us. And I thought of a client who I know listens to the podcast as well. She at some point during the holidays texted me too. She was like, hey, I overdid it on this, or it was in her check-in or something. And I was basically just like, yeah, I overate, on this day too, a lot more than I should have. Just wanted to let you know that. And she was like, huh, weird. That makes me feel better. So it was just we have a common suffering. I think that's how people truly connect.
And so when it comes to Aaron and Jordan, it's like you said, it's not that we want to hear them mess up, but it just makes it kind of feel like if you mess up, it's like, oh, that's okay. Other people aren't perfect. I'm not the only one that's messing up. Other people are doing it too. And again, that's not to say that we should just be like, oh, well, I'll just continue messing up. We
Yeah.
still want to strive to be better, but it is nice to know that people you might even look up to have their struggles too.
Yeah, well, and it's something that Jordan had said was in his version of the episode, he was basically you don't to look both ways to cross the street because you don't want to get hit by a car, and you don't necessarily have to learn that by getting hit by a car. There's people that have been hit by cars enough to where word's gotten around to where you just know to look both ways, right? And so it's kind of like that where, maybe some of this won't apply to you if you're not a business owner, but I think that there's just a lot to be shared and learned with the mistakes that we've made because at the end of the day, it's like people skills, it's personal development, it's our journey as humans that we're sharing, and it's just the vehicle is fitness or personal or business. So hopefully you get some value out of it, and we teach you something where you can look both ways without getting hit by a car in a different area of your life.
Yeah. And I will also say one of the big things that they talked about too, which is something I think that we have struggled with a little bit, is like, because we are in a like authority, position, we have people, we've got clients and stuff. It's hard sometimes to be open and vulnerable like this, because we feel like, I don't want someone to now doubt me,
Yeah.
or I don't want someone to think that I'm not a professional. So I think that sometimes comes up when we're talking about being vulnerable. And, I do encourage you to share your story, whether this resonates, if you're someone who has people who like work underneath you, or you're thinking, well, I don't want to share my story because I don't want my friends to think lesser of me. It like Marissa was saying, like, it does build that connection aspect, and you would be surprised how many people will appreciate you being raw and honest with how you're feeling or what you did.
Absolutely. So with that being said, let's embarrass ourselves. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with business or personal?
Um, we can maybe start with personal, since I feel like that might resonate with people more, and then we can jump into the business side of things. And if they want to listen, they can continue listening.
Yeah, because if you're that nosy and you want to know all the juicy details, then you have to wait. Okay.
Yeah, so let's jump off with personal.
Okay. So the first one that I have here is like the simplest, is literally just like at the beginning of 2022, probably like the first full quarter. I just had this belief that like I had to train in the morning. And like I kept telling myself the story that I have to train in the morning. I don't have any other time of day. Like this is when it needs to get done. If I'm going to go to the gym, this is when it's going to be. And that was just a mistake, because it literally led to so much just unhappiness with like my energy and my routine. And I am just not a morning workout person. Like I admire those who are, but like I love slow mornings. Like it's my favorite thing in the whole world to just go through my morning routine, to make my oatmeal, to have coffee, to like read a little bit of my book, to journal a little bit, like to have like that like quote unquote influencer slow morning. Like I've been doing that to start this year off, and I'm just like I'm so happy with it. Like I just love it. So I don't know. I have no desire to go to the gym in the morning. And I was telling myself that story, and I share that because as a result of telling myself that story, it was basically I burned the mindset into myself that like if I don't go in the morning, then it's not happening. And the problem with that is you will believe any story that you tell yourself. So if you tell yourself, I can only train in the morning, I can only train in the morning over and over again, you're going to believe it. And so you're going to have more of that all or nothing mindset with training just in the morning. And you're not going to give yourself any other opportunities throughout the day to look for other windows. Now I only train in the afternoon or evening. And like my workload is the same, if not more. So like I was telling myself something that was not serving me, and it was not true. And so something I had to learn in 2022 was to really just ask myself, like, is the story I'm telling myself actually true or not? And if you ask yourself that question for a lot of things, it's like eye-opening. You're just like, oh, actually, no, I've been telling myself a lie this whole time. So that's my first one.
Yeah, so I think that's it's interesting though, because I have like a different perspective on things, because I'm definitely not a morning person. I love sleeping in. And what I've been struggling with was, do I stay up late? And because I know typically Colton is going to be asleep and he's going to stay asleep. So I have this kind of, I don't want to say unlimited time, because I eventually do have to go to bed, but I was staying up super late on my computer to work. And then I was sleeping in the morning. And so within the past couple of weeks, I've been forcing myself to wake up at like 5:45, 6 o'clock to jump on my laptop and start working until whenever Colton wakes up, because I know I have that like uninterrupted time. And I almost kind of like this approach a little bit better because I feel like it forces me to be more productive, because instead of my mindset being like, oh, I have this unlimited time that he's
Yeah.
asleep, I now have like, okay, I have to work because this is time crunch, because I have no idea when he's going to wake up. So however much work I can crunch in. And so I've changed, like, I'm not a morning person by any means, but I just know like I literally have to do it at this time.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that, but it's like, yeah, I'd prefer, and I don't know, I still feel like I have slow mornings. Like once he wakes up, I'm like, okay, now I'll like, you know, I mean, I know I probably should be doing this upon waking, but I do wait for like water and everything until after I'm done feeding him so I can have a true weigh in. So like once he's awake and fed, then I'm like, okay, now I can have water. Now I have my vitamins. Now I can have my coffee, and like it's slower and I'm just like waking up with him and like all those things. But like, I don't know, I would like also challenge you. It's like if you only have a specific window of time, like, yeah, it'd be nice to have a slow morning, but like sometimes you just got to get some stuff done.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like there's
Yeah.
definitely a cutoff. Like it's slow in the sense that like it's quiet and I'm reading, but I'm not like, let me spend 2 hours here. But that makes sense. That's why you get back to me so much earlier in the day now. Because like I'll send a message like as soon as I wake up if I think of something, right? And I get a response from you and it's like 7 a.m. my time. I'm like, what the fuck? Why is she awake?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. We're always, regardless, we're always up by at least by 7. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, my husband, as you know, is like he's usually up super early, but it's been really nice to get out of bed like a couple times before him.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've also been like, because I value slow mornings, I've also been pushing my wake up time earlier, which is happening without me really even trying, because like Bennett will just whine at like 6:30 or like 6, and I'll be like, oh good. Like this morning, 6:05, he was just yapping and Aaron was like, that's a I gotta pee bark. Please take him out and wake up. And I was like, ah, fine. So I was up really early today.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's like
Um,
almost like having a kid, just without the breastfeeding and, human aspect.
Yeah, it's so funny because before I had a kid, I thought like, oh yeah, having a pet is like the exact same thing. And then you have a kid and you're like, oh, I feel
Nope.
really bad to all the people
Yeah.
who said that too.
Well, some moms tell me like, you basically like have a kid now. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like maybe it's similar. And then like and I'm like, there's no way. Like it's gotta be way easier. I can lock Bennett up in this crate whenever I want. Like
Yeah, I will say it, like when we were in the midst of puppiness, and granted, like we got Sadie when she was 5 weeks, so it was
yeah.
really hard. Like really, we were getting up like every hour on the hour, which is like not, I mean,
Yeah.
and again, like our newborn experience may be very different from someone else's who is waking up every hour on the hour. We weren't doing that. So I remember he looked at me and he was like, having a kid is going to be easier. And I was like, you are so stupid. But he was 100% right. Like it was way, way harder having a puppy. So I will give you that.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Are we
What
gonna
was
ping pong or do you want to go down your list?
let's ping pong.
Okay. For me, speaking of having a kid, so my entire world was like turned upside down. And I do speak a lot on, social media about prioritizing yourself and your fitness and your nutrition, which I think I did a really good job. Um, but at the same time, I feel like I maybe could have pushed myself a little bit earlier. And again, I say all this and I feel like hindsight is 2020. Like maybe I did
Yeah.
and I could have made things worse, right? So I'm saying this from a perspective where I feel like I probably could have pushed myself a little bit more. Um, and maybe just not prioritizing my needs is maybe a better way of like saying that. Whereas
Yeah.
like I waited a little bit too long to just like basically tell my husband like, hey, I need time for this too. I need a little bit more time. I need to be able to like go to the gym. Like I need time for that. And like once I just said that, it was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was like, I just feel like I should have done that a little bit sooner. So I feel like that was a mistake that I made, which I feel like is ironic because I talk about that on social media all the time, but like I fell victim of that too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, it's probably funny because like when you brought it up, I bet he was like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Like whatever
Yeah.
you like, tell me what you need. Versus,
Right.
and like in our heads, we're like, oh man, but like, they're busy and this and that or whatever, right?
Yeah. And so I think the thing that I struggle with a little bit too, and it's like with working from home, it's tough because it's very hard. And I will say, I guess this will kind of bleed in a little bit to my next one is like kind of getting emotional versus like trying to communicate with facts or like trying to remove that aspect or like keep maybe even like keeping score of things, which is you shouldn't do in a relationship, but maybe not being able to empathize with the other person as much because like I do understand like he works and he comes home and he has this like narrow window of time to get things done that he wants for the day, whereas he may view my working from home as like just have all of this time to do whatever I want, which is very different when you're caring for a kid and trying to work. So for me, I tell him, I'm like, I would love to go to work and have 8 hours of uninterrupted time. Like that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I literally am going to pay someone so I can do that for like even a couple hours. So for me, I'm like, I would love for that time. And like you come home and then you just get to do all the fun things that you want to do. So it's just been difficult, like trying to work around your schedule. And I think at the end of the day, like maybe recognizing like, hey, if I don't hit all of my business goals that I want, if I don't hit my personal goals, or if it takes me a little bit longer, like it's not the end of the world. Like I'm gonna get there. I also have a kid and like this phase is temporary. So like that's been a big game changer for me is like instead of comparing everyone else's success or what their journey looks like, just being like, whatever, if I am like having this time and I'm enjoying it, then it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be where your feet are because like your firstborn is only however old he is today once. So yeah. Um, cool. Well, that like I feel like that also bleeds into like your childcare one too. With that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that does. So, I would say like I guess this is business, but maybe business and personal, I don't know. It's just waiting too long to hire childcare. And I will say there's way more that goes into it than just like hiring someone. Like there's like a nanny tax. If you pay someone more than I think it's $2,600 for the entire year, you then are subject to a nanny tax and they're considered an employee of like your business, like your family.
That's
So
weird.
you can't hire them as a contractor. It's really, really weird. So you have to pay like employer um tax and stuff. And so like
Weird.
yeah, it's really weird because I was like, well, why don't I just hire a contractor? But I was like, oh, but like if I'm paying them for childcare.
Huh. And
Yeah,
that's
so there's
if that's if you want to write it off.
no, that's just even just like our normal regular household.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, as he's like chatting in the background. But I think I don't know. I just waited too long and I don't love the idea of like someone coming into the house and like someone else watching him. I thought that I'd be able to do it all, but as he's gotten older, like it's just been hard because he's sleeping less and less. Um, so I'm trying to combat that with waking up earlier and things like that. And just being a little bit like, I don't know, just getting into routine. But I feel like with kids, once you get into a good routine, like they change it up on you and you have to figure something else out. So it's a lot of like it's just, I don't know, a
Yeah.
lot of pivoting. But I do need to hire someone, and that needs to happen. And I waited a little bit too long to start doing that and looking for someone.
Yeah. Well, at least you know now.
Yep, ready for my next one.
Yay. Okay. Well, I have like one more big personal one, and the next one just completely starts bleeding into business things because that's like where most of my personal development and lessons learned have come from, just from the nature of like that's what I'm trying to grow in right now. But first, like I guess one of the biggest lessons, I wouldn't say mistake. I mean, I don't like at the end of the day, like these are all like maybe they're mistakes, maybe they're lessons, right? But like we don't look at them like, oh, it's a failure or it's a mistake, I shouldn't have done it, because like we wouldn't be here with this perspective if we didn't have that. But I had a really terrible crisis in about like 6 weeks out from our wedding. I decided that I was going to question everything. And basically, no one knows about this, and only the podcast people will know about this. But basically, like, I was like, oh my God, like I'm only 25. Like, what if this and that? Am I ready for marriage? Like, did we do all the things we need to do to be ready for marriage? Um, is this the like all the doubts, like literally every single one that you could possibly have. And in hindsight, I know exactly what caused all of that, and I'll explain it to you guys. But yeah, I was like a fucking emotional mess for like a good, like solid couple weeks.
Can
And
can confirm.
and yeah, I'd talk to Christine. And like the thing is like one thing that I really love about Aaron is that he's very protective about like if we have something going on in our relationship, he's like, please do not talk to other people about like our issues, because like most of the time that's how like friends or parents or influences get in and they say like, oh yeah, you should break up, you should blah blah blah, get a divorce, this and that. Because like most like females will just like empower each other and like, say what the person like wants to hear, what feels good. But I was just very careful, and like if I'm going to share this with someone, I'm going to share this with somebody who is like going to actually be objective. And I have a very limited list of people that I trust to do that. Christina's one of them. And then I have one more friend, and then my dad, and that was it. And so I did kind of have some sounding boards in that, which was great. I tried therapy. Um, it was fine. By the end of it, he basically told me that I probably don't need a therapist because I have friends who are willing to challenge my beliefs. So he basically said, like, as a therapist, if you have people like that in your life, you probably don't need therapy. You can still do it, but like, if you don't want to pay for it out of pocket. So, anyways, I was an emotional mess, and like we ended up talking it through. I ended up moving forward with it, and I'm very, very, very happy with that decision. And basically, in hindsight, what it was is something that honestly really rocked my world in 2022, which is called the upper limit theory or theorem. Um, and this is by Gay Hendricks, who is an author of the book The Big Leap. And essentially, the theory is we have a certain amount of good that we allow into our life. So when things are going well, we oftentimes will self-sabotage to go back to a prior level of comfort of things not going as well. So, for example, like if you're having an awesome time with your work or business or your salary, and you're like, oh my gosh, everything's amazing. And then all of a sudden you start realizing you're having this relationship issue. Like for myself, I was like, oh my gosh, questioning everything. Should I call off the wedding? Should we delay it? Like all of these questions. And in hindsight, it was like everything was going so well that like there was a part of me that was like, it can't possibly be this good. I can't possibly own a business, have it be thriving, like have an amazing team, have an amazing life, have an amazing relationship and marriage where like someone truly supports me through and through, like everything in me, whether I realized it or not, was like, nope, like you don't deserve this, like time to self-sabotage out of it. And thankfully, I have plenty of people in my life, including my now husband, who is willing to challenge that and say like, no, like we're good. um, but like, it's crazy. Your mind will create these things. And I had a situation recently where I caught myself coming up against this upper limit again. And I caught it this time in action. And the funny thing is, as soon as I recognized what it was happening, I stopped feeling the way that I was feeling. Like December, we had like a record month for revenue for PCC. I was feeling on top of the world, tons of momentum going into the new year. And then all of a sudden I started having these questions raised in my head. And I spent 2 days harping on those questions. Thankfully, it was a weekend, so I wasn't wasting time. But then on Monday, I was like, holy shit, this is the upper limit theory again. And like, it's trying to detract from my focus on all the things that are going well. Because guess what happens if I pay attention to the problem that I'm creating? Like, I will have less emotional energy. I'll have less energy to devote to this, and I'll take steps backwards until I just have to find my way back to where I was, because that's what we do. We self-sabotage ourselves into comfort. So that was a huge lesson, in hindsight, of course, because I don't think I read that book until like a couple months ago. So I didn't know what the upper limit theory was at that point, but highly recommend that book. We can probably put the link to it in like our description. And yeah, that was huge.
Yeah. And I would say for anyone who's listening, like it's pretty normal to just like, I mean, I feel like sometimes you just like, I don't know, you get engaged and like, you're like, oh yeah, this and this and this. And then it just hits you like, oh my gosh, this is real.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like, that doesn't mean that you have to like discredit all your problems. Like sometimes the upper limit theory comes up and it's a timing issue. So with the issue I encountered recently, this was literally last week, but it came up and I was like, is this the upper limit problem? And so I asked myself that, and I basically answered, it is in terms of the timing. It is not in terms of a problem that needs to be addressed. So like, it could just be a not right now thing, or it could be I'm going to compartmentalize and work on this later. But so that doesn't make it like an invalid issue. It's just like, is it something that's going to sabotage what good is coming into your life right now? Potentially. So yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. Do you have any? Yeah, so we're all right. Now we're into business, right?
Yeah. Well, the one that like kind of like I wrote it as personal, but it's kind of mostly business,
Yeah.
was just like, I think I've talked about this a good bit here, but like just how like anxious I was through like the last half of 2022. And this was like around this time as well, with like the wedding and everything. Like we had some hard months in the business in like June, July, May, June, July, I think were our lowest. And I was feeling super anxious through all of it. I was like, oh my God, we're never gonna get clients. Like, we're all gonna just crumble to the ground. This is all just a fluke, like all the doubts basically. And um basically, like what I learned was my mistake was not taking ownership over my emotional state, because it was the anxiety that I was creating that was creating low revenue, was creating slim margins, was creating tough financial situations for me to try to navigate. And it was really up to me and on me to show up differently. And that's how it turned around. It wasn't until I realized it took me like 4 months, like May to September. I realized in September that it was on me and that I had to change. I had to level up. I had to learn how to take myself from being anxious to feeling abundant and feeling confident and feeling strong. Because if I show up anxious, guess what's going to happen? the team's going to be anxious, whether they realize it or not. Then they're going to perform in that way. And then they're not going to perform. And then we're not going to do what we need to do. So when I realized that it was on me to take ownership over how I feel and what I need to do, I had to change some habits. I had to take better care of myself. I had to be very intentional with how I showed up and how I prepped for certain meetings, calls, days of work. And I'm still working on it. Like, it is an active practice. And I struggle with anxiety and scarcity and feeling like we're not going to do what I want to set out to do basically every day. But it's like an active practice that I'm now aware of. So basically it obviously bleeds into business. But what like I told you, we had a record setting month in December. So I clearly turned it around. And part of that is from another mistake, because I decided also not only to change my emotional state around it, but also to throw all my work-life boundaries to the wind. So I turned it around because I was working like double time, but it makes a huge difference. And like, extrapolate that to anything, like how you show up is going to determine the results that you get. So if you're in your fitness journey and you're anxious and you're afraid of failure constantly, like, it is okay to feel those things. Like, you're not going to stop yourself from feeling them, but it's what you do with that. It's how you turn that around. It's how you decide to change your state by taking different kinds of actions in order to see a different outcome. Because if you act out of fear and out of insecurity or scarcity or fear of judgment, like, you're going to take small actions or the wrong actions, and then you're not going to progress. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also too, like, I like the parallel that you made with fitness, because it's like, if you are operating from this idea of like, oh my gosh, is this going to work? Is this going to be enough? Like, am I going to reach my goals? If you're constantly questioning yourself, if you're like doubting your coach, or you're doubting the journey, rather than just putting your head down and like getting to work and just trusting the process, like, you're going to see way better results than if you're like constantly doubting yourself and second guessing yourself. So I think, I mean, just with anything that you're doing, it's like, yeah, of course it makes sense to like sit and be like, hey, is what I'm doing, is like, is this going to get me closer to my goals? But at the end of the day, if you have a solid plan, like, just execute.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like, the whole time I knew what I needed to do. It was literally just my emotions getting in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'll kind of go off of that. So for one of my business mistakes, I would say, is not setting expectations clearly. And whether that you can hear Colton in the background. Whether that is, and I'll try to see if I can give him a teether, keep him a little bit quiet, but whether that was with my team or with clients. So I think at the end of the day, it's extremely important for you to set expectations, because, and this goes for, if you're in a relationship or anything like that, like, if you have these expectations, but you do not communicate them to other people, they're never going to reach them. So I always like to say, like, the whole, like girls, they want flowers for like Valentine's Day or something. And if we don't say it because we just think the other person should just know, and then your significant other doesn't give you flowers on Valentine's Day and you're pissed, well, it's like, well, you had these expectations. And if they didn't know it, if they were trying, if maybe they thought that like you would want like breakfast in bed or something, but you didn't get flowers, like, you're going to be pissed regardless of what they do for you.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really important that if you have expectations, that you let them be known. And same thing when it comes to clients, like, hey, this is the client journey. This is the client experience. This is what you should expect. And if you don't like this, then this is not the program for you. And so I think it's just very important that, like, that you set those with your team members and let them know, like, hey, this is what I expect. And then you also model that as well. So kind of like what you're saying, like spending time like before meetings to prepare, because you would want your team members to do the same thing, like how you show up on your meetings, because that's what you would appreciate. So just like small little things like that. I've just been more conscious of and have been trying to move forward with in this year.
Yeah. Man, expectations. I could talk about that for a whole podcast episode. Um, yeah, that's actually something that I feel in 2022 I learned to do very, very well because it was a biggest mistake of 2021 for sure. For sure. So yeah, definitely I feel you on that one. Okay, so piggyback.
Sorry, I do want to pop in and say something too. So I think it's really important that when it comes to like, with your team, like you can't also expect people to act or like act a certain way or do something a certain way if you didn't train them. Like if you didn't like
Or if you don't do it.
yeah, or if you don't do it, if you don't explicitly say it, like, so it's like, okay, well, here are like the expectations on everything. This is how I want you to do. Like, you can't be mad at them for doing something that you didn't tell them. Like, here's how you do
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you also can't expect them to remember something that you only told them once. Like usually
Yeah.
you have to tell like your team members or a client or something. Like I was just on a meeting with one of my coaches and their client, and we were basically going over her journey, her timeline, her projected timeline for everything that we were going to do together. And we go over it multiple times. We go over it within the sales conversation, and then we go over it um, in our course. So the client goes over it on their own in a learning module. And then we go over it live on an onboarding call. And then we go over it on a goal setting call where we're planning out the rest of the timeline. And so we do it like 4 times. And yet we were on that final call that I mentioned, the goal planning call. And I was like, hey, so yeah, reverse dieting. Do you remember what that is? And she was just like, nope, don't know what that is. Like, great. We've gone over it 3 times before this, but like, she didn't remember it. So like, if a client's not going to remember something after the third time that you've told them, and you're going to tell them for the fourth, why would you think anything differently of a staff member or another client? Like, I think a lot of times we think like, oh, because I know this, I can say this once and they're going to know. No, you have to remind, and people need to be reminded so much more than they need to be taught.
This also is I think a good reminder for us because I think that sometimes it's like, okay, thinking about like what onboarding call is this for us? This might be, 100, 200, 300,
Oh
this might be
yeah.
our 300th call. And so I don't want to say running through the motions because I don't want any client to think that that's how we approach the situation. But it's like, we've gone through this, right? So we're going through everything and it's like, da, 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 da. But for this client, it's like, this might be their very, very first onboarding call. They've never gone through a fitness journey. So everything is so new, all the terms that you're using. And so it can feel really, really overwhelming. So it's like, yeah, of course that they don't remember what reverse dieting is because every
Yeah.
single call has been their first one. So I've had a lot of like chats with like other moms or like certain situations. This one person in particular was like closing on their home and like I don't know, someone dropped the ball on something and was just taking their sweet ass time and they didn't close on their house on a certain day. So like they didn't have a place to live. And so it's like, I think that sometimes when you're in a profession, it's like, oh, this is just what I do every single day. So like, whatever. But it's like to your
Yeah.
clients, like to those other people, like it's their first time, like, or it's their life.
Yeah.
So just like remembering that.
Yeah, and like I talk to my coaches about that all the time because it's like if you're gonna list out or like my sales team or my coaches or like anything, if you're gonna list out a process or if you're gonna list benefits to something or if you're gonna list a sales pitch, like commit to that every single time because yes, I know this is your 200th time doing it and you feel annoying and you feel like it's so redundant. It's because it's your 200th time, but it's the first time that the person on the other end is hearing it every single time. So like commit to it, say it with as much enthusiasm on the 200th time as you would the first, and like that energy, it matters so much. And to like the theme, it's like you can't expect people to do things that you don't remind them to do, that you don't teach them to do, that you don't train them to do. And also you can't expect people to do things that you're not modeling yourself. So I love telling my team to have great work-life boundaries. But I did a shit job in all of 2022 for the most part. And I'm not perfect, but I am doing better. Like my morning routine's a lot better so far this year, and I'm loving it. And I've been taking more walks, taking care of myself better this year so far. I know we're only 19 days in, but like I feel really good about it and it feels sustainable. So I'm just rolling with the momentum. But I basically, like I said, to turn things around in September to basically end of December, I said, fuck it. And I was like, hey, Aaron, just want to let you know, I'm going to probably work double time for the next couple of months to make sure that these things turn around. And he was like, supportive husband, go for it. And I'm super blessed for that. But it's almost like a crutch, right? He's going to let me do whatever I want to do, which is probably not something I should be abusing. And so I had to let somebody go for the sake of the fact that they could not do their role. They were in a really demanding full-time job and they were trying to give me too many part-time hours that they just didn't have. And so I was like, awesome, I'm going to try to hire for this role. And I basically, number one, here's a mistake, didn't post about hiring for the role for way too long, tried to hire internally and basically turned through like 6 or 7 people that said they wanted the role and then got into it and they were like, actually, like, no, I'm good. So like like a good like 4 months of just like hire, that didn't work out, hire, that didn't work out, hire, that didn't work out. So I ended up, after I let this person go, doing this role myself, which is another 20 hours per week from my phone. So I would do like a good like 8-hour day and then I would sit on the couch and I would do another 3 or 4 hours on my phone until it was time to go to bed. And I was fucking burnt. Like for most of the fall, I just like, I barely remember it. It was a blur. I was super spacey. Anytime Aaron told me something, I'd be like, what? And then like, he would remind me later and I'd be like, you've never told me that. And I was just like literally like the epitome of burnt out, candle burnt from both ends. And it was like, yes, that role did have to be done for us to literally stay afloat. But like my mistake was trying to do it all by myself, trying to hire internally. Because as soon as I posted that I was hiring for the role, I had a ton of applications I never expected to show up. And I had a great interview process. I was able to hire multiple people for the role to just make sure we got it going. And they're fucking crushing it now. Like, it's awesome. But like, I waited so long to do that. And I was just stubborn and in my own head. And then I was like, you know what? I'll manage it for now. It'll be fine. And like, really, I just was struggling more than I think I realize now that I say it out loud.
I have a super noisy little one in the background. But
Fine.
yeah, I love that. And I think again, it like goes back to expectations too. Like, hey, Habs, like, are we working overtime? Just letting you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also with like the boundaries thing too, what I was trying to get at, and I just went on a complete tangent, was you can't expect people to uphold the boundaries that you don't set for yourself. So like I noticed this when I started, like I do a quarterly one-on-one with all of my team members where we kind of reflect on how our quarter was. And the first 2 meetings that I had, both people were like, I was not looking forward to this meeting, Marissa. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, because like this was kind of a shitty quarter. And I was like, oh, why is that? And they were like, I just feel like I didn't take care of myself. And I was like, oh, I have something to do with that, whether you realize it or not, because I was messaging you at 9 p.m. on Slack, even though I told you you don't have to reply to me. What am I doing? I'm setting the precedent that I'm on Slack at 9 p.m. Like, no fucking duh. Like, so it hit me when I was doing those like performance reviews, and I was like, oh man, I gotta get my shit together. Not for me. Like, who cares? Who cares about me? For them, like for their quality of life. So that was a big wake up call, but I'm glad it happened. So yeah, not doing that again.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have another one that you'd like to share
yeah,
with the
I think
class?
I think that both of us have on here like avoiding hard conversations. Like it's awkward, right? Like it's so awkward to like, hey, like speaking of, we have these expectations. I am upholding them, but you're not upholding your end. And like again, if you've made those expectations very clear, like whether you're tracking them with like a KPI or like you've made it very well known, you've communicated it, maybe you've said like, hey, like this needs to happen and it's not happening. It's sometimes very, sorry, he's very loud. Um, it can be really easy to just avoid it or just have like, hey, like, I just want to let you know, like, haha, LOL, like, and that's telling the other person like it's really not that big of a deal. So
Yeah.
just being upfront, because otherwise you're going to start to build resentment, or maybe like you start to look at a team member a different way because like whatever it may be, but just like it's just so much easier to clear the air and just come at it from like a factual standpoint instead of feeling a certain way. So just being like, hey, like I like told you that these meetings were going to be on this day, like you have not made them to two of them without letting me know. That was an expectation. Like I understand life happens and things come up, and just let me know. And if like that's it, then that's it. But like just completely not coming to the meet or what, I'm just using that as just like one example.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to have those conversations. And I think what you and I are learning, like we went from being a coach to now being CEOs and business leaders. That's very different from like what we were originally doing. So like we are still learning as we go and learning how to manage, learning how to be a boss. And so it can be, I don't know, it's tough, but like I remember as an employee, like I would rather someone have a hard conversation with me so I know what they're feeling or what is in the rather than just like feeling like why is there this like disconnect or why is there this like weird energy for the past like couple months. Like I would just rather know like, hey, if you have a problem, let me know and then I can fix it and address it and move on and then we're Gucci.
Yeah. I can one up you.
Let's go.
I not only avoided hard conversations, but I also delegated a hard conversation early last year that turned into a screaming back and forth on Zoom because guess what? Hard conversations are not to be delegated by the leader. Like if I need something to be communicated and it was literally like the stupidest thing. It's probably the biggest mistake. Just the decision to delegate that conversation because I thought it wasn't like important enough that like it needed to be said by me. And it was clearly just a horrible call. And it just ended up being, it almost like really like turned the company from the inside out, to be honest. We would not be here today if that had happened. But but yeah, it ended up all working out after many a hard conversations following. But yeah, don't do that. And also, um, when I was having hard conversations to begin this year, I just wasn't myself. And I also was just like setting an expectation for myself that was unrealistic. And I just thought like, as a leader now, like, cause I was starting to hammer into my head, like, oh, you're a CEO now, you're badass, like you lead people, you have to be unemotional, like you have to be able to make callous decisions and all of this. So I was like showing up on like calls with some of my team members being like, so this is what it is and that's it, and you don't have a say and I have no feelings about it. Like for lack, like obviously it wasn't that, but like for lack of a better like term, basically like that's what I tried to do. Like I would like script myself out so that I would like, because if I was having a hard conversation I was like, well, I am very emotional, so like I can't like wing it, I'll just start crying, so like I gotta script it. And I made a script and it was super like there was no emotion to it. And um yeah, that didn't go over well. And so like I definitely just fucked a lot of that up. And my biggest like lesson was just like the best way to be a leader is to do so with empathy, to show your team that you care about them, to actually have close relationships with the people you work with. Like in a company like this, right? Like I don't know about corporate, you probably shouldn't be best friends with your boss in corporate, but like for something like this where we're such a heart-centered company where we're like doing like people like really good things in their lives, you have to lead with the heart in all aspects. And like my emotional journey was like the forefront of 2022 was like learning that I have them, learning to acknowledge them, learning to feel them, learning to not see them as weakness, learning to like just everything when with regards to emotions. Like I grew a lot in that sense in 2022, and it definitely benefited me as a leader.
It's funny because I remember a few times and granted, it's different. Like sometimes we have time to chat before or after the podcast, but I remember a few times where we'd be having we'd be talking about something, but then like I could see that you were shut off. Like we were having a conversation, but like we weren't. Like there was like no emotion in it. So it's like, okay. Like so it's interesting, and I feel like I have seen a shift in you and how you like carry yourself in different conversations. So I would say that the work that you put in has paid off.
Yeah, well, we're still doing it every day. But I will say quality of life is definitely better that way. Um, I just have one more. Shitting thousands of dollars down the drain trying to scale Facebook advertising too quickly for about 6 months before I figured something out that actually worked. So if you're going to use Facebook advertising, use a small budget first and don't scale the budget until something is actually working and you have data and numbers to prove that it is working. Because my dumbass was like, oh, we're getting people into our Facebook group with these ads. Scale the budget by 10x. And then thousands of dollars later, oh, these are all really shitty leads. Damn.
Do you follow Annie Miller's podcast?
I know her. I don't follow her podcast.
Okay. She just put up a part 1 and part 2 about how she spent $80,000 on Facebook ads.
Oh my
And
God.
basically same thing happened where she got away from what she felt like was success, made her successful in her business, and trusted this ad agency. And eventually, like, it's just very interesting. So I would challenge you to, or not challenge
Oh
you.
yeah.
I'd
It
say
was
go
like
listen to that.
it was fucking stupid. So yeah, that was a mistake. And like that one hire, that content agency that I tried to hire, that was also a mistake. Lots of expensive mistakes. But you know, we learn from them and we're still doing fine.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of those. Well, one of them I would say, yeah, I probably signed on to do something again that didn't make any sense for me at the time, but I don't know. I was like, just hey, the fax action, if you do this now, I was like, I need to do this, but I didn't need to do it, and I should have.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so I feel like, yeah, it's just, and I think at the end of the day, like we say all these things because it's like we are not perfect by any means, whether it comes to fitness, or personal or business, we make mistakes. But the biggest thing is we're not saying like, oh, we're fuck ups, we're failures, yada, yada, yada. It's just like, hey, these were just lessons. Some of them were more expensive lessons than others.
Some of them were
But
pretty fucking dumb, but you know,
yeah,
we're here.
but the thing is, it's like, okay, well, we learned from it. So we probably, maybe, hopefully not, don't make those mistakes again in the future, but we're more equipped to handle certain things. And I think that like taking messy action is better than no action at all. So the
Oh
fact
yeah.
that like we did make mistakes, it's like, hey, well, you tried Facebook ads, and like now you learned something that didn't work, and now you're more equipped when you are doing ads, which is hilarious because I just saw one pop up on my Facebook before I hopped on here. So it's like,
Nice.
yeah, so I think it just, like I think that sometimes if you're still listening all the way here, it's like when it comes to health and fitness, sometimes we're too scared to do something because we feel like it's not the perfect plan. Or we feel like it's not the perfect time, or like, what if we make mistakes? What if we mess up? It's like, yeah, you probably are going to, but you're going to learn from it, and you're going to be better equipped in the future. And like, you're going to be able to reflect a year from now and say, look at everything that I accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did make a post recently. This is the last thing I'll say because I do got to run after this, but that's not to say that you should avoid mistakes, because the more mistakes you make, the more you learn. And being indecisive and not taking action on anything is going to also be a mistake that you will reflect on and be like, man, I shouldn't have done that. Because I will also say one final mistake for 2022 is waiting too long to make certain decisions about hiring, about mentorship, about firing someone. Like literally every mistake has something to do with like not making a decision in time. Not everyone, but a lot of them have a lot to do with being indecisive. So, my quote of the week was being like indecisiveness will kill more dreams than taking action and failing ever will. So
Yeah.
I'll leave you with that.
I love that. Awesome. Well, I don't remember how to end the podcast because it's been forever. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Crystalline Fit. Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening. Good luck in 2023, and we hope to see you back next year.